All right, welcome back to the F3 Northeast Way Q Source podcast. I'm your host, Blake Anderson, Money Pit. With us today, we've got Royce Hathcock, Yoda.
What's up, Money Pit?
Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Man, I'm excited to be here. Let's go.
Yeah, I'm guessing most packs are expecting you to have your rope or something like that as a visual.
Yes, we need to bring back the rope for sure. It's injured many a packs.
Yeah. Well, so real quick, two things. I don't always ask everybody this, but one, how'd you get your name?
Yeah, probably like 11 years ago, I was at Urban Jungle there at North Hills, and
Mm-hmm.
we were running down Lassiter Mill there, and we stopped along the way. And on the way back, the Q said, "All right, everybody head to the top." And I thought I was hanging, and then I ended up in the back, and I was walking, and a couple of guys came back and got me, and they were in the circle doing flutter kicks, and
Yeah.
I didn't know any of these people except one guy, and so they were talking about what movie did you grow up on, and so I said Star Wars, and then it started going all over the place, and then somebody said he's got hair in his ears, and then somehow I got Yoda,
Or the
because
hair in his ears.
yeah, he was like the guys, they're like he's involved in a lot of stuff, and so I thought it was going to be Jar Jar Binks, which I
Yeah,
just
right.
and I got lucky and got Yoda, so that's how it happened.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was under such circumstances. You're such a wise dude and you always bring so much wisdom to the COT and to the workouts. And I just figured it was some, major respect or honor. And I didn't realize it's just because you have hairy ears.
Well, it was kind of both. It was like hairy ears, and someone said, "Well, he's a pastor, he's an executive director,"
Uh-huh.
and
There you
so
go.
it was going to get ugly, and then it didn't. I weighed 208 pounds then. Now I'm a nice tight 172.
Wow.
So
Holy
yes,
moly.
yes, I thank God. It was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. Okay, then follow-up question. Where did the rope come from? What gave you the idea? I mean, that thing is a torture device.
Yeah, so there's a guy that in kind of the deep North Raleigh, Baby Ruth, and him and another guy, an F3 guy in Wilmington. I've never met him, but they bought this rope together. And
Okay.
so when I met Baby Ruth, he's like I met him at one of the workouts, and he's like, "Hey man, you got to come over to my house and see this rope." And so that morning I drove over there, and there's this big pile of rope. I thought it was an anaconda. And
Yeah.
he's like, "Man, you want to use this thing?" And I'm like, "For real?" And he's like, "Yeah." So then I kept it for a few months, took it around to workouts. And then everybody, kind of loved, hated it. And then the
Yes.
guy in Wilmington wanted it back. So they took it back. And so we need to buy one for the area. We need to get one.
Woo! Okay, we can all breathe a sigh of relief. We won't be seeing that anytime soon, thank God. And if you're new and you haven't done a Yoda rope workout, they are brutal. This
Yes.
thing weighs a ton and you got to drag it a long way. So, this week we are talking about Q3.5 articulation. And if you've been following along with the podcast for a while, we're really in the meat of leadership skills. We talked about putting teams together with SLT, mutual competence, and trust. And then as Flush kicked us off into the four leadership skills, which are vision, articulation, persuasion, exhortation. And I saw Yoda at the workout the other day, and I've been wanting to get him on the right chapter this year. And when I knew this was coming up, I thought this would be perfect. So we're in articulation. And for those of you who don't know, obviously Yoda just said he's a pastor. He leads an organization, neighbor to neighbor, for many years now. And you just don't lead a sustaining organization or be a community leader if you can't articulate a vision. And so I thought it would be a perfect guy to bring on to the podcast just to share some tips and tricks, techniques, some real wisdom about communicating, about articulating vision, and getting people to rally around a cause. So Yoda, first, just let us know what is neighbor to neighbor. How long ago did you start it? Because that kind of is kind of I feel like a basis of how I know you as a community leader, not just F3 guy, but you've been articulating vision throughout the greater Raleigh community for a number of years.
Yeah. So we moved here in 1996 from Los Angeles, and I did this kind of work out there for 8 years. So we've been here 29 years. Came out to work with a friend, and we worked together for 6 years, and he went back to LA. And so that vision really came up out of the neighborhood, and people really said, "Hey, we love y'all hanging out in our community. Can you help us see our vision happen. So people had a vision, but they didn't have the resource.
Mm,
So that's really how it's been really a journey of listening to the community and coming alongside people, and then seeing how that vision comes about. Neighbor to neighbor comes from the Luke 10 Good Samaritan passage
hmm.
in Scripture.
Yep.
And so the end of that passage, which of these was a neighbor to a man beaten and half dead along the side of the road? And so really for me, that passage along with the community really is kind of the paintbrush of how we have articulated vision and really
Mm,
trying to flesh out the depth of what does it mean to be a neighbor, similar to the expert in the law asked Jesus, what does it mean to be a neighbor? And Jesus said, well, you're an expert in the law. You tell me. And he gave him the right answer. But he wanted to define being a neighbor. He didn't want to be a neighbor. And so that's when Jesus laid out the parable. Two religious people passed by, but a Samaritan stopped, someone that was not supposed to have the answers, bad theology, a despised person. And they went the 10th mile. They got bloody with the person,
right.
and then those were the three options. Which of these three? And they weren't even allowed to say Samaritan, so he said the one that showed mercy.
Hmm.
And Jesus says you must do this today to live, right? And so mercy, to have mercy is the alleviation of all suffering, right?
Yeah.
Mercy is compassion in action. Compassion means to suffer with to the point of solidarity. And so that passage is really how we articulate vision. And that is a vision
Hmm.
that Jesus brought, and really digging into the depth of what these things mean and trying to create a space where neighbor and neighbor's desire is to cross every ism and chasm there is and bring people together in a collision to actually create what looking like a neighbor is in the world. And so when we think about the vision of neighbor to neighbor, there's the world as it is and the world as it should be. And
Wow.
inside
Yeah.
of that gap, God gives all of us mission, right? Like
Yeah.
God wants all of us to have people to care about and spend our lives on behalf of, to bring and close that gap and make it closer to what God's flourishing looks like, his reign of liberation. So yeah, every day we're either for the reign or we are against the reign,
Hmm.
right? And so when we live in that rhythm of understanding, articulating our individual mission, that's connected to that larger mission, and spinning ourselves on behalf of what is God concerned about. Well, what is God
Hmm.
concerned about? People, all
Yeah.
people.
Absolutely.
And God wants people to flourish. God doesn't want people to be oppressed. God wants
Hmm.
balance. God wants us to be engaged with one another. So the idea of neighboring and really articulating that vision to the community, inviting people into that. That is the journey that God has really taken us on here in Raleigh. Not what I expected.
Mm, right.
Really, neighbor to neighbors become a place where people enter into that space and they have a collision and they have an opportunity, what I would call have the quality of the approach. And so we don't just get to be neighbors, we have to be proximate, we have
Hmm.
to be present, and then
Hmm.
when we do that, we build relationship, we earn the right, and we then make neighbors. We prove ourselves neighbor. And so,
Right.
so proving ourselves neighbor is a big part of neighbor has this vision to alleviate all these things of oppression. But
Hmm.
inside of it, it really has to do this basic thing that's very hard to do. And it's saying, am I going to be proximate and present in a relationship? I'm going to prove myself neighbor. And when I prove myself neighbor, I make neighbors. And then that mission of that individual and the community and what neighbor to neighbor desires to see happen in the world in that gap starts to shrink, you know,
Yeah.
and that changes all of us, right? It changes all of us to be in that space. And I'm excited about the things that we do in the community because people have asked us to do it. But ultimately, it begins with that very small thing that's a very big thing of being proximate and present
Yeah.
and learning how to prove ourselves neighbor.
Mm, wow. Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. What a journey that's been on. So in the chapter, Dred says, everyone can have vision, right? That's just human nature, but not everybody can articulate, and that is a skill that has to be built. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about the journey you've had to learn to articulate vision. And I know that as a leader, that evolves over time and matures over time. And I know that clearly you've got to be good at. I know some people who've been affiliated with Neighbor who I have a tremendous amount of respect for, who are incredibly quality people who I know wouldn't just follow anybody. They are people who would only come because there was a vision worth following. There was a mission they believed in. And clearly you were able to articulate to some, I mean, quality people, people you don't even know that I know who were affiliated with you guys who are just were captive or, captured by the vision, but clearly you articulate it. So share this kind of the journey it took you as a leader to learn to articulate your vision in a way that you could attract quality people and kind of organize the community around what you were doing.
Yeah, I mean I appreciate the way you talked about that. So in a journey of 29 years, you have the ability to look back and kind of look at those different stages, but when you're in that stage, you don't know it, right?
Yeah, right.
And so, really the first 5 years here in Raleigh was really going out there and hustling, earning the right, meeting people, being engaged in the neighborhood, and just being consistent, persistent, proximate, present. Again, doing the same thing of earning the right to be a neighbor, proving neighbor, and then beginning to build opportunities. So our mentoring program, which is really connecting people one on one with students after school in math, language arts, and ESL, kids age 6 all the way through high school. And so starting to ask people, will you come and give an hour a week? And then those relationships, you listen, and everything we do comes from those listening relationships, and that's changed, or I would say even enhance the vision, right? And so that is when F3 talks about articulation, it talks about really, painting your target, right?
Hmm.
And I think our target um, really comes out of that relational piece and really not losing that. And then that has given us all kinds of opportunities. So over time, we've gotten opportunities because we are in the community and we are consistent and present. And people are really like shocked that we're able to, have lots of volunteers, that we do the same thing over and over, and we're committed to that. And then that builds credibility, right? It builds opportunity of simply just like doing what you say you're going to do. It's your
Right.
yes, your no be no. Like showing up in spaces in under-resourced communities. Often people blow in and out of them, right? So they get
Right.
funding, they blow in, do a lot of nice goody goody drive-bys and shoot people up with stuff, and then the funding
Right.
ends and they leave. Under-resourced communities have a lack of, right? And
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
consistent present
Right.
of resource and people build
People
bridge.
make campaign promises, right? But where
Yes,
will they be years down the line, right?
yes, and so that articulation of really bringing resources. Our community may be under resourced in the way that the world defines it, but it also has wonderful assets that people don't know about. And so bringing those two things together then gives people a bridge to flourish, a bridge to the mainstream, a greater sense of the possible. Um, and so those things, honestly, like a lot of that I just learned through listening to people,
Wow.
people
Wow.
mentoring and saying, gosh, I don't feel like I'm
Yeah.
giving this kid much, but I'm changing. I'm seeing poverty different. I'm seeing people
Yeah.
different. And really, people giving that feedback. There's this other really important thing. And sometimes I think all we're supposed to do is create a safe space for people to come
Yeah.
and collide. And
Yeah.
that stuff happens, right? Um,
Yeah. Man, this is Dred didn't go here in the chapter, and this is wonderful. I mean, he's given to us free of charge. I just want to put my finger on a couple really powerful things that you said to make sure that our packs didn't miss it. So much is talking about the words that we use, but what Yoda is really saying is it starts with your just being present. It starts with that commitment. Kind of reminds me of this quote that I think was attributed to St. Francis of Assisi that says, "Preach the gospel at all times, and if necessary, use words."
yeah.
Right? Like you first you earn the right through commitment and through building of trust. And as that trust is built, people naturally want to hear what you have to say. They naturally begin to kind of a rally around what you're doing first, right? And then the words start to almost take shape out of the doing and the movement that's happening. So it sounds like you got on the ground, you became present, your team became present, you listened, and out of that, the vision almost was communicated through osmosis in a way. It sounded like, and then maybe the words began to follow.
Yeah, really giving people an imagination,
Hmm.
a story, a vision for this is what neighboring looks like in the world, right? And for us to have a flourishing community, really creating a space where people can make that connection, and that's something that I really felt like I was hearing from people from outside communities. Is I would love to be engaged, but I typically don't find that experience, right? And so,
Right.
really having an hour a week, one on one, people begin to get an imagination and they begin to rethink about what maybe the way they've thought about things like poverty and really understanding that, you know what, I'm in poverty too as a mentor, right? Like
Hmm.
I impoverished because I don't have solidarity with people that are under resourced, or I don't really understand what's going on in this community. So there's material poverty, there's spiritual poverty when we push back against the spirit working on us, and there's poverty of lack of solidarity. And
Mm.
solidarity means to be one with, that mutuality is real. And I think that's something that in the back door happened at Neighbor that I didn't realize was going to happen.
Hmm.
You know, that piece, when people have that collision of proximity, we begin to realize that God does have in mind for us not to just care for those that are under resourced, but to be in proximity, present relationship. Wesley said, if the poor aren't your friends, you can't know God. That's
Hmm.
pretty extreme,
Hmm.
right? But Jesus said in Matthew 25, he said, these people are me, the prisoner,
Hmm.
the sick,
Hmm.
the one with no clothes. And
Right.
he said, when you do this, it's not just you did this to these people that were in need. He said, that's me that you did that with, right? And
Mm.
so that's very disturbing, right? Like, God is calling us in his economy. When he said, blessed are the poor, it wasn't that they're blessed because they're poor. It was like blessed that God was saying that my economy that Jesus
Yeah.
brings
Right.
is flipping the table of how the
That's right.
world is operating in. And
Yeah.
so the world of hoarding, the world of it's about me, like God comes to create that balance in scripture. Justice and righteousness are the same word, right? So this idea that we're supposed to be loving God and doing justice, right, and
Hmm.
bringing that balance. So in the back door, that's kind of what's happened, and so
Mm.
that's got us into other things like living wage work, in our business programs that we have that are LLCs. It's got us into recently into what you've been helping us with in terms of a neighbor real estate of looking at
Hmm.
housing. Um, how can we bring balance to the world? We are called to do something about these things that do oppress people, that are unjust, that power is pressed over people, and to be a neighbor would mean to be like, you know what, that's not okay. And what can I do? How can I have an imagination and a vision to neighbor differently, which then moves the world a little bit closer to as it should be instead of how it is, to
Yeah.
close that gap, So I think giving people imagination for the
Hmm.
articulation of that vision, of
Mm.
maybe their concept of neighbor, their concept of words like compassion or justice, or what does it mean to live out faith in the world. Some of that gets flipped a little bit to think about that, wow, like Jesus was more revolutionary than maybe I've taught. And
Hmm.
that revolution wasn't supposed to be radical, it was supposed to be normal. Like this is the way we all are to move,
Right.
right? And so neighbor exists because that gap is there, because we're not getting it done in the world the way we need to. And ultimately, we want to move in such a way that we do are merciful people, that we alleviate all forms of oppression.
Yeah. Let me, I want to turn a little bit into some tactics, and I
Yes.
just want to throw a couple quotes off of you and just kind of get your response. when it comes to articulation. There's a quote by John Maxwell. It says, "Educators take something simple and make it complicated. Communicators take something complicated and make it simple." Love to hear your thoughts about the need as a communicator to take complicated things and make them simple so that people can understand what you're up to, say yes to, and join you in your movement.
Yeah, so I think again for me, my action steps on that are really, most people have heard the Good Samaritan passage. So what is the modern day Good Samaritan look like, right?
Hmm.
And so learning to help people with that vision that it's not a drive-by of goodness, but it's really this actionable way that we are to engage in the world. Um, and the gap, I think that's what I think about a lot is the world as it is and the world as it should be.
Hmm.
That in the space of who we are as leaders, and even when I think about being in F3, you have this group of people that show up for another man, leave no man where you found him, leave no man behind. And that man could be really out of shape or in great shape or anything in between. And our job is really to see that gap and to say we're
Yeah.
going to be better together, right?
Yeah.
And that is that discipline of I'm going to the workout, I'm going to the workout, I'm going to the workout, right?
Yeah.
Um, Invite others into that vision. So
Hmm.
really show people their place in making neighbors, right? Like that is it's not about being nice, right? It's about being just, right? And
Yeah.
understanding like how to do that. And then anchor ourselves in something bigger than ourselves. Like
Hmm.
when I think about F3 when I weighed 208 and now I
Hmm.
weigh 172, I didn't think I needed to lose weight or anything, but F3 anchored me in something very simple. Like here's
Yeah.
our mission. Here's how we live out this mission. And that is just simple. You hear it every time. You got guys trying to do it and they could be brand new or 10 years or 5 or 3 or whatever. And that's attractive, right? Like you want to
Yeah.
get on that. It's bigger than me. Um, and then it's a shared thing, right? Like it's a
Yeah.
shared creed, it's a shared mission. And each man gets excited about that. Like my friend F3 Tuba is the Nantan for the continent of Brazil, right?
Okay.
He used to be here in Raleigh. He's Brazilian, and he went back to Brazil. He got his F3 name here at Agoji, and he's a guitar player that we named Tuba, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so he's got F3 going there, and again, it's a simple thing that he's like other men here need this in Brazil, and then I think just repeating that often, like
Yeah.
articulation really gains power and momentum through being consistent and persistent, right? Like
Yeah.
F3 is consistent and persistent. It's
Hmm.
boom, boom, boom. We're gonna do this, and I think
Yeah. Communicators
we're
have to
able to
have
that way
to
too.
communicators have to communicate until you're sick of communicating. I mean, oftentimes the CEO is the CRO, Chief Repeating Officer. Good articulators don't say it once, they understand you got to say it over and over and over again because what is imprinted in your mind might take many repetitions before the people you're talking to get it imprinted in their mind.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think I've said that Good Samaritan piece so much, and I always tell people it's a disturbing passage, right?
Hmm.
Because there's more there every time I read it. And the same thing with the Matthew 25 passage. It's the sheep and the goats are both surprised at their status in the kingdom, right? So they get to the end, and Jesus lays out the criteria for the judgment of what he's really concerned about is how we engage interhumanly with one another,
Hmm.
right? That's the definition. And then he says, "These are me," and the sheep are like that was you, that was
Hmm.
you,
Right.
right? And the goats are like, "When didn't we?" And he says, "When you didn't." And so people are judged for not what they did, but what they didn't do. And we
Hmm.
see that what God's economy is really about is that inner human reaction inside of places that have lots of gaps. Like all of us are called to that mission. And when F3 talks about finding your mission, like
Yeah.
that's in all of us, right? It's in all of
Yes.
us to solve problems in this world and alleviate those gaps of suffering and oppression,
Yeah.
and instead creating flourishing. In F3, we all flourish because we have this community that says we are going to care for each other on that level, and we're going to neighbor that way. We're going to be in solidarity. We're going to be blood with our brothers, right?
Yeah.
That's what we need to do in the world, and that's the mission to me for all of us.
I love that. I want to put my finger on that word gap. I think the best leaders, I mean, we think of leaders being visionary. So you're identifying this new peak, you're identifying this new vision, this place you want to get to. But the real leaders don't just identify where you're getting to. They open up the gap between where you're trying to get to and where you really are. And oftentimes between where I am and where I need to get to is a pit in the middle. There's a gap. And the real leaders know how to, one, show us where you're going, but they create a bridge over that gap, and that people are able to understand and follow as we leave one place and head towards another. And I love the way you talk about the gap. It's really a challenge for us to look around and say, where are the gaps that I see? Because that really could be the mission calling out to you. The leader has to see a gap, because leaders are called to help build bridges over those gaps. And it's not from running away from it. It's embracing that they're there and tackling, the challenge of the gap and rescuing the people out of the pit under the gap.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think the way to really think about that gap is we see the gap, but the gap, I think for a leader to give a vision, it has to be renamed, right? Like this world,
Okay.
this world like numbs us,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So then we are numbed by all of these things that have need and the pain of it. And we got our own stuff going on in our own lives, our own communities, but really renaming that gap, and then we can be given a vision for like,
Yeah.
okay, how can we alleviate that and change that, and really to have an understanding through the lens of that this world is going to numb us. So there is the real world, and then there's this world that we're being fed. And to me, like leaders, I think that's true in F3. Like we are serious about, look at, as the curriculum says, you gotta look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm a jackass, right?
Hmm.
You gotta be accountable to the brothers to be able to, like, we're going to hold each other accountable in things. And so that's not just talking about a gap, it's renaming that gap and moving us to a vision that we can do together to change the reality of what's going on in the world and make it a little bit more like it should be.
Yeah. Love it. Well, I want to kind of bring us to a close and just kind of just challenge the listeners that you're a leader. If you're an F3, you're a leader. The vision of F3 is to invigorate male community leadership. And so if you're coming out to an AO, out into the gloom, you're a leader. And the challenge to us as we're wrestling through this curriculum is to step into that identity as leaders, to step into the skill that a leader needs, which is to articulate a vision and be able to plot a course for people to follow you from one place to a place of advantage where their lives are better, where the world is made better. And that is a skill that takes time.
Yes.
Yoda's 29 plus years in to articulating a vision of a thriving organization. And, don't give up after the first time. Continue to articulate it. And it seems like the more you articulate it, the better it gets. Albert Einstein is quoted in saying, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it to yourself. Right. And so it takes time of communicating things where you start to where it becomes clear enough where you can concisely present something to someone who's able to say, I get it and I will follow you. And that's the role of us leaders to be able to articulate a vision where people will say, yes, and I will follow you there. Yoda, any parting comments as we bring this episode to a close?
Yeah, I agree. Practice articulation in your own vision. Be
Hmm.
able to, tell your story in a way that people can see themselves inside
Yeah,
it,
it's good.
and look for the gap.
Hmm.
The world as it is, or the world as it should be, and consistent, persistent, proximate inside of that, because all of us are supposed to be those problem solvers. So
Yeah.
I thank God for that. And I thank God for F3 helping me. The brothers, the packs make me more every day. So I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, Yoda, I just want to recognize you as a leader. I appreciate that though you live miles away from us, you come visit us up in the Northeast Wake region regularly. we see your name on the Q sheet, and it's kind of one of those cringy things where we know, I don't know if I want to be there, but I know I have to. And so we appreciate you. It's like you're holding us accountable through your presence in our community. You are a leader for that. And for those that don't know what Neighbor to Neighbor is up to, this man has been a leader in the Raleigh community for almost 30 years now, is making a difference. I've had the pleasure of meeting some of his staff and go down to HQ, and I know lots of people who've been involved. And really quick before we head out here in about a month, you guys have a annual breakfast. Why don't you just let us know, and I'll put it in the link. We're already passing it around the Northeast Wake region. The breakfast is your annual vision casting time, and it's in September. When is it? Where is it?
Yeah, it's September 17th, and it's 7 to 8 a.m. Raleigh Hilton. There'll be about 400 people there.
Yeah.
We still got some spaces. Love to have people come out. You can sign up on a link at endtoendoutreach.org. So thanks, everyone. It takes a team and a big family, a village to make this stuff happen. And so I would never, I am because of all the people around to say, I want to join that vision and let's make it happen. So, love to have you all out.
Yeah. Well, the results of your leadership are nothing short of impressive. The things that you're working on that are about to transpire are exciting, and I've had the privilege just to be able to hear about it, and I hope that the PAX will hear. So I appreciate you coming on, sharing what it looks like to articulate a vision over a long, sustained period, and I know that this has been inspiring to our PAX. PAX, we'll see you this week at the Q Source table.
Thanks, y'all.